Welcome everyone to a new session with Code with Sally. The session runs every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm happy to have you with me on this session. For anyone who's joining for the first time, we have a recording, like all the sessions we had in the past. We are recording them. We are uploading them on Code with Sally session channel. So subscribe so you get updates if we add new videos. Sometimes I add videos answering questions for people, or just tips or hint how to do things. So not necessarily only the recording for the session. For the previous sessions, currently the main two playlists you'll be looking at will be the English for beginners, intermediate, and Agentforce for developers. Those are the main three playlists. They are always sorted with the oldest first, then the newest at the end. Currently, we are in the intermediate series, so if you have any questions, feel free to send it to me. And I will make sure, if it's a topic that you want to cover and we didn't cover it yet, I will see if it fits with the intermediate series. We'll add it to the sessions as well, while explaining the other topics. So feel free to check the playlist we have in the channel. If you have questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Slack. I would be happy to support you whenever I can. So last time we started talking about Apex invocation types. We covered a bit of it in the beginner series. We saw the execute anonymous, we saw the triggers. And in the intermediate, we started with the asynchronous Apex, and the first type of it was the future method. The future methods we saw last time. What's the benefit of it? How to use it? What's the syntax for it? What's the limitation in terms of parameters that it accepts? The return type should be void. It should be static. And we saw one use case, which is to solve the mixed DML errors. And we saw another use case, which is the triggers like callout. And there was some questions last time because we didn't explain together in the session yet, like the APIs, JSON, how to do callout, what does callout mean? So I got some questions during the session and after, like if we can go a bit slower or deeper in those topics in order to explain the problem of the trigger callout. So that's what I will be explaining in this session. I will go again through the trigger callout. I go through the topic of API, what's the API briefly, JSON briefly, and try to make it more appealing and easier to understand. And we'll go again and see the problem in the trigger and how doing callout in the trigger is failing and how the future will help us. Towards the end of the session, we'll talk about the limitations of the future methods, and we'll explain as well the unit test classes for the future methods because we didn't cover it last time. And it's important to see how we can test them because they behave differently than the normal methods or normal non-asynchronous code in testing as well. So to start with, like last time when we talked about the trigger callout, we started saying API and we started to say JSON and we started to say callouts. And all of that are new keywords for anyone who was just starting Apex and development with us with the series of the beginners. Those are new terms, so it can be a bit overwhelming. So those are the topics or the keywords we want to cover. What is an API? So an API, it's abbreviation for application programming interface. You don't have to memorize the abbreviation, it just to know that it's related to programming and it helps two system or two application to talk to each other. So it allows one system to request an information from another system or to add data to another system. So for example, what we were trying to do last time is to consume an API or to use an API that is available publicly and it's free to get the country information. So again, API, it's a way for one system to talk to another one by calling exposed methods. So we saw together when we were writing Apex that how we can write a method. So you can think about it as if you have an external system, another system outside of your org. You don't know the system, you don't know the technology that they are using, you don't know anything. It's like a black box for you, but they are exposing some methods for you to be able to call to do something or to return some data for you. So that's simply what's an API. So you can think about it as a method from another system exposed to you. You call it through an endpoint, which is the address or the endpoint, the URL for the endpoint, and it depends if it needs to pass some parameters or not. So when you work with APIs, usually you will have some sort of documentation. They can give you a page like this one that tells you like what are the endpoints, like the different URLs you can hit or like try to execute. So here there is one endpoint to get all the countries. Here get means like the operation we are doing, it's to get information, to fetch data, because you can do update, you can do delete if the other system that we are trying to call is allowing this. So let's say another system is allowing you to add new country. We would have a method or an endpoint with the different operation available for us to consume or to call to allow us to add a country in the other system. But for now, for example, this system that we don't know anything about are exposing for us get all countries and get country by name. We can do another endpoint, another URL, pass at the end the endpoint, the country name, and get the response. And we'll talk about the response and the format for it. And another one for the language, like get me all the countries that speaks certain language. So those are the three kind of methods that they are exposed for us. We can consume any of those to get the data we want. In general, when you start working with APIs, or at least that's my preference, when I start working with API, I don't rush and use it in my Apex or my Visualforce page. I start first with one tool, if available. Sometimes they give you a tool called, for example, Swagger, and that's allow you to try to hit the endpoint or call it and see the output so you know what you are dealing with. But in that case, we don't. So I'm using Postman. Postman, it's a tool that you can either download it or use it online. I have exported this collection for you, and I will add it on GitHub. You can import it. I will have for you, let me show you here. I will have for you a Postman collection. It's like a file, JSON format, and we know more about JSON, but you don't need to update anything in this JSON. All you will need to do is to download it from GitHub. And if you have Postman either on the web or downloaded, you will just hit import and you will drag the JSON file that you will download from GitHub and you will have it. So let's try it together. So here, why I'm saying try it together, because usually it's good to see it in action and to know what it does return or what it requires in terms of parameters before starting and rushing to work with it in Apex. And again, this is not related to future methods. I'm just giving you a flavor of integration and APIs. In the future, we'll have a session dedicated for API and different methods and different operation. But for now, like you can have get, post, put, patch, delete, a lot of options you can do. It depends on the other system, what they give you or expose to you. So now we have only a get exposed, and I entered here the endpoint. If I say send, and it's a simple API, it doesn't require any parameter, no authorization. There is no like token needed to generate, nothing. So I will hit send, and it return here, you will see status 200. That means it went fine and we were able to use this endpoint, and it returned for us the data that the other system is returning for us when we call this method in their system. So we don't know, is it a database? Is it another Salesforce? Like we don't know how they are storing these data, and we don't need to know. All what we need to know is that we need to call this endpoint to get the response. There is another one that we can say what are the countries that speak Arabic. It can return for us the different ones with the details for them. Same if we have a country with the name, like we can pass it and we hit send, it returns 200 in the data. So all of the three like endpoints that are available for us for this API is they are all get, and we can consume it. So you can try it and play with it. If you have a Postman or you want to do it on the web, you can take this collection and try it. But that's just briefly to give you an idea what is an API. Okay, next is what is JSON. So when we hit the endpoints here in Postman, we got a status 200 that it says it worked fine, no issues, no timeout, the resources available for us to get the details from. The response was as well something, it's not text, like it's not written in paragraph. It has a specific structure. This kind of structure, we call it JSON. It's a standard way of sending back data from an API to whatever system it's calling it. There is another way to pass data, which would be an XML file, but most probably people are leaning or going with the JSON mostly because it's easier to read, it's more structured, and it's easier to parse or to convert it to your code in Apex. So that's the other keyword that we heard about like last time, JSON. So again, it's an abbreviation of JavaScript object notation. It has like a specific notation that it follows. It's common format. Most of the API I consumed during my working experience, I was always returning JSON most probably. It's easy to read and parse. So for example, if I have this, it has specific syntax. It has to be followed. Like you don't need to know the syntax in depth yourself, but some basics like the keys, like name, capital, region will be in double quotes, then colon, and then the value. If I have after the value in double quotes a string like this, that means I can convert it to be a string for me. If it's like between square brackets or like Paris here, that means it's an array of strings. If it has a curly bracket, that means it behaves like an object. When we talked about object-oriented, we said an object will have different properties and attributes. So that's an object that has one attribute now as common. So when you receive the data from hitting an API or consuming an API, and it returns JSON, the JSON is returned for us as a string. So it's unstructured, it's hard to deal with. Like I cannot, from a plain text, go and say that the region is Europe. I have to like parse it. So Salesforce gave us like a JSON class, like you will have here JSON class that helps with several methods. The most probably the two that you will be using will be serialize. That's if you have an object and you want to convert it to JSON. And that's mostly is used, for example, if you have an endpoint that is expecting a body. So you want to pass a body, most probably you'll pass it as a JSON. So you have a class with different, like an instance of a class, an object with different properties, and then you serialize it to prepare the body that you will pass, or the deserialize. And deserialize is the opposite, that we have a JSON and we want to convert it to an Apex. So let's quickly have a quick look. I have here, I will create a simple class for you to parse this close all tabs to parse this JSON in it. So I would say new Apex class and say simple country wrapper, and I will get here the syntax. We have the name details is an object, we said, because it has the curly bracket. So I created a name details, it's a class with a common as the property in it. And then I have the capital. We had it as square bracket. That means it's an array of strings because it's in double quotes here. So I did a list of string capital, and we saw as well the region is a simple string. So we create this class. Do you have to create this class by yourself? The brief answer is no. I used to use a website, but I found that it's not working anymore. The site is down. So you can use Agentforce for developers. You can give it the JSON that you have and tell Agentforce for developers to give you the wrapper class that you would deserialize the JSON in. Or if you are using ChatGPT, you can do the same as well. So, but again, you need to know how it's working or what it means so you can make sure it's clean and it does what you want. So let me go here. I'll get the string that we have, the name and the capital, the example that we have on the screen. So I put it here as a string. So that's how, like when you call an API, it will return for you as a string. So when you come as a string, like it's hard for me to say that the capital is Paris. It's hard to say that from plain string, like it's unstructured. So we want to convert it to structured. We know if we convert it to a class, an object from this class, it's easy with the dot notation to go and get what is the capital line. So simple country wrapper, that's the class that we are doing. And then we create our object. Then we do call the JSON.deserialize that we have in the documentation that we just saw together here. So it gives you the syntax on how to use it, and it gives you an example as well how to do it. And that's what we are trying to do here. So we did JSON.deserialize. We give it the JSON. Let's take it here, make the string the same name. So we pass the string to it, and then we say like you would be deserializing it in the format of the wrapper class. Like that's the format that you will be deserializing into. And after doing that, I can, as simple as using the dot notation, as if I'm dealing with a normal class, a normal object from this class. So I can say, okay, I want from this country, I want to get the country.name, and .name is the class. So it's an object now from it. I can do another dot notation .comment that will give me France. For the capital, it's a list of strings. So I can do capital 0. Then the region is simple string. So I can do country.region. And that should give me Europe. So if I try to hit it now, you'll find that we have country name France, capital Paris, and region is Europe. So that's how you can deserialize a JSON into a string. And the other way around is the other method that you can do. For example, in some cases, as we mentioned, like the API can expect a body or parameter to be passed, and that would be a JSON format. So for example, you can have the other way around. You can have a wrapper class. So we created here an object from the country, and then we set, I want the country.name. It's a new country wrapper name details, and I named it France, or I can here change it to be Egypt. And then I say that the capital, it's a list of string, and it's Cairo. And here I say it's Africa. So I'm dealing with it as if I'm initializing an object from a class and using the dot notation to set the values. Then I want to prepare the JSON string that sometimes an API may need to be passed. So I will use another method that we have here in the JSON class, and that's serialize. So it takes what's the object you want to serialize. So that's what we are trying to do here. I do serialize and pass the country object that I created, and I will just print it for you to see it. So when you do that, I got something similar to what we had for Paris. We had the region, Africa, colon for the name, double quotes for the name, colon, and curly bracket because it's an object. The common Egypt, capital between square brackets because it's an array, Cairo. So we were able to generate the JSON that maybe the API would need. So this example, just to give you an idea, like JSON is a standard that will be used in a lot of APIs, and it has a specific format. I wouldn't worry too much about like learning. You would know like the basics of it, like the double quotes for the keys, colon, and the value. And what you have after in the value dictate what will be the type, like whether it's an object or a class or an array, which will be a list, or plain values like string or number. Number won't have the double quotes. The quotes will be for the string. Again, you can use LLMs and to generate the wrapper class. And the wrapper class, once you have it, you can use the JSON class in Salesforce, whether to deserialize a string in that format or to create an instance from the class and then serialize it to give you this format at them. So it's a standard and it will be used whenever you are using APIs. We are just touch basing on it, like in explaining briefly what it is and how to use it, how to generate the wrapper class, because that's something we did last time when we were showing the example for the trigger callout. The next keyword, like we heard about last time when we were talking, was callout. And because we were saying the future method helped me with the issue of API callout from triggers. So callout is how an Apex code will do or send an HTTP request to an API. So we said an API is as if an external method, another system is exposing for me to use it, as we did in Postman here. We have an endpoint, a URL, and we try to access it. So in Salesforce, when you have this type of endpoint and you want to access it from the code, we are doing a call out. So it's like Salesforce calling out another system to get information or to send information to another system. So that's why we name it call out. It's outbound. We are trying to call something outside of Salesforce, whether to get data or to send data. And callout, as I told you, like it can be as simple as fetching data, and that's what we are trying to do today, maximum. Or it can be a post, like that would be send new data to the server, and like if you want to create contact in another system, it can be a put, and that's update a record in another system, or patch, update certain parts of the record, not the whole record, or delete, we want to delete a record or data in another system. So it can be different operations. For the purpose of this session, we are just trying to do the get only together. The problem we are trying to solve and why we are explaining API, JSON, callout along of future method, because Salesforce has a limitation that you cannot do a callout from triggers. Let's see in general, because that's the syntax we missed last time and we were in rush. So we wanted to go deeper in it, how to do the call out from Apex. So let me open here and a class that I will have for you in GitHub as well. You can use it. Try country callout utility. Country callout utility is a class that I created for you to demonstrate how to do the callout, and we'll see after that how it will fail in calling it from the trigger. So again, it's as if we are doing a utility class. So we have the methods here as public static. Here it will return country wrapper. Country wrapper is not, it's just a class that I created. So country wrapper, again, it's nothing more than I took the response coming from the try that I did here in Postman. And personally, I used ChatGPT, and I gave it the sample. It was too long to send it, so I like trimmed it to 2 countries and send it to ChatGPT. So it gave me like what is the wrapper class or the syntax for it. What you can change is like if you have a subclass, you can change the subclass name. But be careful, you cannot change the parameter names because the parameter names needs to match, for example, name. I need to have something here called name to match what we have. But if I don't like that the subclass name is called name and I want it to, let's say, be name details, you can change the subclass name, but the property itself, it has to match what you have in the JSON. So the country wrapper, that's just the wrapper that I will return the deserialize the JSON in. And when I will say get country by name, that's the method I created. I can take country name. So the use case that we want is that I pass get me the details of Egypt, can get me the details of Canada. And it returns for me the details from the other system by consuming this endpoint, get country by name, and I pass like the endpoint that we have plus the name of the country that we want, and I want to get the details for it. So that's the use case we are trying to demonstrate together here. So what we did is we started by creating HTTP request because I'll be calling an endpoint. And the HTTP request has set of methods. So one of them is to specify what's the endpoint. We said like it's an expose method, but I have, for example, here 1, 2, 3, and I can have more, like the other system can have more, and I can be integrating with this endpoint, with Google APIs, it will be another endpoint. So I have to tell my request what I'm trying to get or which endpoint I'm trying to get. So that's why we say here set endpoint. Again, for the sake of the demo, I'm hard coding the endpoint here in real scenarios. You would be storing this in a custom metadata or custom setting. It depends on like if the endpoint changes from dev to full or UAT to production, then you won't keep it in custom metadata because it will be the same for all. You would store it most probably in custom setting and have as one of the post deployment steps to fill the value for it. And then we are using the country name and appending it to our endpoint. Here we said before, like the method we are trying to hit or like this endpoint is a get. So we are getting some information. So we are specifying the get. So the same as what we did, kind of you think of it of the steps you did in Postman, we are doing it in Apex. I said what is the endpoint and I said what is the method. That's exactly what we did here. The next is for me to hit send. So that's what we are trying to do here. We did http.send and I said, this is my request that I'm trying to send. So when I hit send, it's doing the same. It's sending my request that contains what is the endpoint and what is the method. It can contain more details, like token, some header values, some body, if the other system is expecting that. When we do an HTTP send, it returns HTTP response. And the HTTP response will mimic what we are getting here in this area. It will mimic that it will have a code to tell me that it failed or succeeded. And it will tell me what's the values that are returned, the JSON, the body for it. So that's what we are trying to do here. I'm checking that the status is 200 to know it succeeded or it failed. If it failed, simply here for the demo, I'm just doing a debug and returning null. I didn't get anything. And for if it succeeded, then I'm accessing the body. The body will have the JSON, this part that we have here in the response, that will be the body. So I have the body and I want to parse it. Parse it here, I just did in my wrapper class, a method called parse API response. It's doing the same deserialize that we did here in my logic, in this one. Sorry, and when I called this and I did the deserialize, it's doing the same for me. So that's what we are trying to do here. We are doing a deserialize. This part, I'm just cleaning up my JSON. And the JSON here, I'm cleaning it up because it has some regular expressions and some characters that it was failing the deserialization. Like this one was failing my deserialization. So I was just cleaning. And sometimes you'll get a JSON that has, for example, a string as a value or property named decimal. Sometimes it uses reserved keywords, and sometimes we have to clean it before trying to deserialize it, because, for example, if I had a parameter here called public string, for example, I can't. So I can change it to be string value. So sometimes we need to clean our JSON before doing the deserialization by changing a value of string to be string value. Again, you don't have to worry about this. This one is not very common to happen, that you need to clean your JSON before doing this deserialization. Again, this one is a public API. It doesn't need any subscription, doesn't need money to be like used. So, and I wanted to get an accessible like API for you so you can try it. So for now, know that I'm doing this so your deserialization doesn't fade, but you don't have to worry about this too much. Most probably you don't need to do it. So that's what we have here, that I'm trying to do the parsing, and the parsing will return for me a list of countries. So let's try together in here. So I will say here, I will return a list of country wrapper, list of countries, and I will say it's a static method. So all what we do is the class name dot the method name, and I'll pass here, for example, Egypt. And I will pass here system.debug, and I want to see capital. And I say here list of countries. It should have only one. So I do 0 dot, and then I will see here, I want to get the name. And the name has common. Or I can have, oh, sorry, this is the capital. We wanted to show the capital. So I can do, sorry, capital. So it's a list of strings. So I can use here list of capital, and I will get the first one. So let's try it together. That went smooth. It didn't fail or anything, and it returned for me the country. I can call it again and pass, instead of Egypt, Canada. And I will get here the debug only. I got Ottawa. So it's taking my request and going to the external system, the other system that we don't know where they are storing these details or from where they are getting the data. Like if you're calling Google APIs to get you the distance between location A and location B. You don't know how they are calculating it or what they are doing in the middle. You know that you are calling it by two zip codes and it's getting you the duration between them. So the same here. We are calling with the country name. We are hitting the endpoint that they give us. We are doing the call out and we are parsing the response if it succeeded to get me the response. Important thing that I have to show it to you. In order for any API to work without any issues, we should go to settings, go to remote site settings, and you should add, like I have here for the country endpoint, I have the base endpoint of my API. If you go to the API here, you'll find that this is the base, HTTPS //restcountries.com. So you should have this in your remote site settings. And that's to tell Salesforce that it's safe to call this endpoint. So let's try for now. I will take this copy and I will try to delete my remote site settings so I can show you what would be the error if you don't have it. And it will be pretty clear, like for you, if in case you forgot, if you hit it, like, or you forgot to add an remote site setting for an API, the error will tell you that you need to do that. So now I removed the remote site setting. Let's try again to call the same endpoint. See, here the error is telling you what? Like you have an unauthorized endpoint. That means you didn't authorize to Salesforce to go access this endpoint. It's not safe to go and use it or access it. So to ask you to go to setup, security, remote site settings, and to add this endpoint. So let's try it together. I will add the endpoint again in the remote site settings. I'll give it a name and I put my endpoint, base endpoint here. And don't worry about it. Like if, for example, you go and you try to add version 3 name and like the full endpoint, it will truncate those for you. So let's try, I added the full path here. And you can give it a description if you want to be good for your documentation, that what's the use of this endpoint or what does this endpoint does for you. So if I hit save now, you notice that it truncated everything else. It just used the base endpoint. So even if you add more than the base endpoint, it will have it for you. Now we have it listed in our remote site settings. If we try again, the same endpoint, we should not have anymore the error of the unauthorized endpoint. So now I tried and it's working fine. I got the capital. I'm not getting in the logs the unauthorized endpoint anymore. So it's very important to remember that. And in case you forgot, you will get an error, and the error like very clear. It will tell you that you have unauthorized endpoint, and it will give you even the path where to go to add the endpoint in your remote site settings. So even if you forgot, the error will help you figure it out. But we need to have this endpoint listed in our remote site settings. So that will take us again, like the main reason why we wanted to check what is API, to check what is JSON and what is HTTP callout and how we do it in Apex. That's not the main reason why we were doing it, but we wanted to get into more details and understand it because we were checking the benefit of future. So we saw what is API, JSON, callout, and we saw the callout together and how we do the HTTP request in Apex. And we tried it together and we saw that it can be executed with no issues. Now, if we want to do that in trigger, we'll get an error. So what is trigger callout error that we are trying to solve? So what it happens when you try to do an API callout from trigger, directly from the trigger. So for example, when we were trying to do the endpoint that takes the country name, if we try to do that in our logic in the trigger, we'll get an exception that will tell us callout from triggers are currently not supported. So the use case that we were trying to demonstrate, I created for you, and I will put as well in the GitHub, the object, the page layout for it, if you want to try it and have it in, you have it in your org as well, you can do it as well. So we have here, I created a country object. It has capital, flag URL, map URL, region, and we can add extra fields based on the response we are getting from the endpoint. And what we are trying to do here, so if I have a country here, let's say Canada. So I want to say, okay, when the user create a new country and enter the name, I want to get the details of the country, like what's the capital, the region, the flag for it, and the map URL. So I can hit here the URL and see where it's located on the map. So that's what we are trying to do. So we are trying to do that in a trigger. So whenever we insert a country, we want to hit this endpoint and get those details. So let's see it together. So I have here a trigger. Let me close all tabs and I will open my resource. Country, trigger, handler, this one. And I will do as well the trigger. And I will have those in GitHub as well. So we have here on before insert, a before insert for the trigger. And we have the trigger handler, what we want to see together, if it will work. I'm calling here country callout utility. If you remember, country callout utility is the one that we have here that do the HTTP request. So what we are trying to do is when we are inserting country by the name, I'm trying to do the call out and to get the response to fill the parameters of the capital, the region, the flag, the map URL to have the same behavior we have. And let's try together and see if that will work. So I will enter here another country, for example. If I try now to hit save, see, this is the error we are trying to solve by using future method. We got here an execution error before insert, and we have like its callout trigger are currently not supported from the trigger directly. So that's not allowed. What we are trying to do is not allowed because Salesforce doesn't allow to make a direct callout. So someone will say, okay, but we are not trying to do it directly. We are trying to use the country callout utility. It's still considered directly because that means it's synchronous. Like the rest of the trigger, the rest of the transaction will be on hold until your logic is done. The way we are trying to do it now, it's synchronous. That means your code will be stopped until the API call is done and it's back. And that's why Salesforce is saying callouts from trigger are currently not supported because they don't allow this to happen. They don't want the trigger to be waiting until another API to be called and getting the response. So that's what we are trying to fix. So how can we fix that? Let's go together and try it. So first of all, I would change my trigger to be after, like we can have it as an after. So let's go to trigger. I will do here after insert. So I want to use the after. I want to make sure my country got inserted. There is no validation error. There is nothing that will stop me from executing. So that's why I want to do it in and after. So that's the first part. I'm just getting here the code that we'll use, and I will have here in my country handler, I will take the logic I have here and put it. So I will remove from the trigger handler the before insert. I will comment it. And I will have here after insert. So after insert, let's save it and I will go update my trigger. Okay, there is a problem on before insert list. Yeah, so that's the country trigger is upset because we commented this. We'll go there and I will say, okay, on after insert, and we want to pass the new country and the map of the countries too. So here, trigger dot new map. So the reason, if you remember when we were talking about the triggers, we said like, let me save this first. We said when we have something where we need to make sure the data is inserted or created, then we can do the logic. We use the after usually. And if you missed the trigger session, you can look into it as well. And you can go use the trigger handler dot on after insert now, because I want to make sure the country is inserted before trying and calling my API. So my trigger handler now, what I'm doing here, updating country details. I'm doing it in bulk again, because we want to make sure my trigger is bulkified. So I'm passing here the key set, the IDs of the countries that we just inserted on after insert. And what we are trying to do here, going one by one, calling, like getting the name for it. So that's why I'm doing my SOCO statement. And then one by one, I'm calling the country callout and getting country by name. Using this name, it will do my callout and update. If I do this and save and try to run it, again, it will give me the same error. What we need to make it a feature, we need to add this annotation. So last time when we did the mixed DML, we used add future, but this is doing a callout, so we have to pass as well that callout rule to say to Salesforce, we are allowing our future method to do a callout. Oops, sorry. Let's save it and see it together. So now it's saved. Let's go now and try the same scenario with it. When we tried it directly in the trigger, it failed. Hopefully the API will work. Let's go here and make sure we have the logs. I will clear it so you can see here log panel. And let's try to insert. When it's inserted, it's empty because we didn't do anything. But then there is a future handler. That's when it will do the API and call the external system for me. So let's try to refresh now. Now that worked because it's not synchronous, it's done asynchronously, and asynchronously is done through the future method that went to the external system, did the call out with the HTTP request, and it got me the details. It's in Asia, like the flag, the map. I can click on the map and can see where it is on the map. So that's the benefit of future method to solve the problem of the trigger callout. Whenever you want to call an API from your trigger, you don't do it directly. You do like the future callout as we did together. And just to let you know, like, I wouldn't suggest that you have this here. Most probably you'll have another class for your helper class for the trigger. And I put this in it to be cleaner. But again, I just wanted to demonstrate for you as simple as like if you have it in the trigger and to show you how the future implementation is simple. It's like you have a regular method. It does the regular code and syntax you have. All what we did in order for it not to get the exception is to make it add future and call out. So what will happen that the trigger won't wait for it. Like it will call it, it will be queued whenever the resources are available, but the transaction will be finished and not waiting for it. The future annotation is not for the after trigger. The future annotation is whenever you want to do a syntax or to call a method asynchronously. So let's say a method that takes a lot of calculation and it takes time to be executed, or a method that the user doesn't need to wait. Like we are calling an API just to inform another system of something got created in Salesforce, but the user does not need to wait. And that's not just in the trigger, like on a UI LWC component. You are doing some operations and you hit a button. You want to notify another system, but you want still the user to be able to use your system. You don't need the user to wait for a response from the API. We call it fire and forget. You fire the API, you call the other system, or you want to fire like the future method. I want to call this, but you forget about it. You are not waiting for a response. So add future is regardless of your trigger. It's not just for the after insert trigger, it's in general. And when your future method is doing a HTTP request, you do call out equal true as well. The reason why we chose to do it in after insert and not before is because we want to make sure the record got created. Like there is no validation rule or another process in the system that will stop the record from being created. We want to make sure the record got created successfully, and that's why we put the logic in after insert. Any
Sally?
questions? Mm-hmm.
Eh, so, okay, excellent explanation. Understand those steps. Now, as far as the user experience on the form, um, do you like, do you, I guess, what do you do to, what is the recommended way to notify the user that they have to wait? I mean, do you have a field on your form that it's there until the data comes back and your class updates the record, or how do you
So
do that?
it depends. Like if you have a use case where, for example, like again, this is a simple example to just showcase how the trigger and the callout from the trigger would fail and how we can make it succeed with the future. But in general, like if you are in a scenario where the user is waiting a response, like I did the payment and I'm waiting to know the payment went through or not, to know my order
Yeah.
got succeeded or not, I wouldn't go and do an asynchronous callout in that case. I'd be working with synchronous callout that I would do the callout and waiting for a response to show the user your order got created successfully, or please try another payment method. We usually do the asynchronous whenever we have the use case where it's data that the user is not waiting at the moment right now to see it. For example, if you have like a long way of calculation to calculate, for example, the points that the user collected so far from their transactions and which tier they are in, like in gold or silver, if you have like a pointing system for them. That's something usually when you are in a real scenario, the user is not expecting the points to be reflected on the spot. And that's something they go and check in again tomorrow or after 3 hours, after some time to see if the new transaction got impacted their status, for example. So in that case, that's something you can choose to do asynchronously because the user is not waiting for the response right away. So the use case of synchronous versus asynchronous will depend on the case or the API you're trying to call. Is it something, for example, I had in one of the projects I worked for, like we had an API that we consume, and the API itself was asynchronous. It means like when we create a record, it's more like we are creating a record in their system in a queue that we want you to do 1, 2, 3. But their system will pick it up at night in a batch job at night. So the user waiting for a response doesn't make sense because we are waiting for the batch job to run at night. So in that case, we used to do asynchronous call out in that case because the user is not waiting. Like we put the record, we get we there is no real response waiting for the user to get. So it depends on the scenario whether you do synchronous or asynchronous. That's something you have to think about. Did I
Okay,
answer your
great.
question?
Thank you. Y- Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So that's the real problem that sometimes people like hit, that they are trying to do a call out from the trigger and it's not supported. And that's where like we say, okay, we will go and use future methods. So with the future method, we saw before when we did the DML, mixed DML, it was as simple as a method signature where it's static, it's void, it takes primitive data types, and it has the add feature annotation. But as we mentioned, because we are doing a call out, we have to do past call out equal true. That's the extra step. But again, future is the simplest way to do asynchronous Apex, but for sure it comes with its own limitation, like the primitive data type, or there is no record return type. So you have to know um, the different ways of asynchronous Apex to know which one you prefer to use. Testing future methods is something like we didn't cover last time. And I want to highlight how we do it because it's different than the normal methods. And the reason why, because when you do a future method, you don't know when it will get executed. Can be executed right away, can be executed in a bit, whenever the resources of it are available. So it's very important to know. We have to use, in that case, test.startTest and the stop test. We touched base on the test.startTest and stop test when we were talking about unit testing and unit test classes, and we saw how it was beneficial to start a new limits for my transaction that I'm trying to execute. So that's another use case where like the start and stop test are very useful is whenever we have asynchronous Apex. So because after the stop test, we can do all our assertions and we like when you call a future method between the start and stop test, once the stop test is hit, you know for sure that the future method got executed. So we can do our assertions at this point, and we know that it got executed and it's done. Uh, for callouts, again, we will see today how we can test it. But again, it will be a simple demonstration because in the future we'll have session dedicated only for APIs and we'll explain it again in more depth. And the reason why I want to highlight it because test classes are important, but in Salesforce, you cannot call a real endpoint and get a real API response from this endpoint during your test class. So we use a mockup class. We mock up the response, like we fake the response. We say like if you call this endpoint, this is the response that you will get, but this response we are hard coding it in a way or another. So let's see the two examples we have here. Let me close those. And I will open here. So here, mixedML, that's the example we talked about last time and was solving the issue of having to create mixed objects like the setup objects with non-setup object together. And we tried to create a user with an account at the same time and without the feature was failing. So if you're writing an Apex test class for it, most probably it will be it's like a utility class and you do mixedML. So that's something you usually do. The next step you would be like you want to make sure that the user got created and you want to make sure that the account got created and you do your assert. And here we were hard coding the name of the account. We were hard coding the user. It's not a real case scenario, but it was just for the demonstration of like how the mixedML error will pop without the future method. So this method doesn't do anything except creating an account and contact, and we are hard coding them. So without the start and the stop, that means I don't know when I will do mixedML. It will go create the account, but it will put this in the future queue or the queue where whenever the resources are available, it will be executed. So I don't guarantee I cannot guarantee when I go and try to get and select this user that the user got created to be able to do the assert. So we have to add the start and the stop to say, okay, within those, do this. And if there is any asynchronous apex, make sure it's done so I can do my assert statements. So if I do now, and I'm going through it like a bit quick because we spend sessions talking about unit test classes, and I think people like were bored when we were doing it. So it's exactly the same. All what we are just highlighting here that you need the start and the stop to make sure your asynchronous apex got executed so you can do your assert. So if I check here the test, my test got passed successfully because I was sure that my asynchronous apex got executed and done, so I could check the user, do my assert, and the same for account, and it passed. Okay, so the other one is for the country trigger. So the country trigger, again, if I'm not doing like asynchronous or if I'm not doing any callout, I'd be like creating a country, inserting the country, then making sure that the country got created and doing my asserts. So the extra two things we did here, one is the start and stop, because we know that there is a synchronous apex running, which will do the callout for the other system. So that's one thing. And we saw how it's working with the test, like the mixed DML statements. The other new thing that we didn't see before is the test set mock. And that's very specific because let me try to save here without it, and I will show you the error. So here, country trigger handler test. If I try it now, I will get a failure. Let's see the failure. Is it the asserts that are failing? No. Here it tells me what? Methods defined as test method does not support web services callout. So any test method cannot do a callout. And we are not doing a callout directly, but when the insert will be called, like, or inserted, the object is inserted, the trigger will be executed, the after insert trigger will be executed. We'll try to do the callout for the endpoint to get the country details. So that's why we cannot have a callout in a test method. That's a limitation. So we have to mock it. We have to fake the response. So we have a method here called test set mock. That's if you go, I have here like an article in Salesforce. I put it in the chat. It's talking about different ways of doing a testing HTTP callout when you do an external endpoint callout, how to mock it in Salesforce. So one of them is implementing a mock, and that's what we are trying to do here. But after preparing your mock, you call a method called test set mock. What we give it HTTP callout mock.class. This is fixed. And then a method that we created to fake the response. So that one is the fake response. If I go to this one, and this is a bit advanced, so I don't want you to feel like overwhelmed. We'll go through it again one more time. But the country mock response is a class that implement an interface called HTTP callout mock. If I do HTTP callout mock interface in Salesforce documentation, you'll find that it has one method called respond. When we implement an interface, and we touch base on interfaces a little bit when we were talking about object-oriented, but we didn't explain it in details. We'll do at some point. But when you implement an interface, you have to go check what are the methods that you have to define for this interface. So for this interface, we have to define a method called respond. If I go here, it tells me the signature of the method. It will return an HTTP response, and it takes an HTTP request. So that's what we are doing here. We are defining a method with the same signature, same name, that expects a HTTP request, and it will return a response. All what we are trying to do here is to hard code the response we have here. We will hard code that the status is 200, and we will hard code what is the JSON that we have here. So I have here HTTP response, and I set the header. I'm saying that it's JSON, like the content type that we are returning in the body will be JSON. And I set the status code to be 200 to mimic this part. And then I'm setting the body. There's different ways. You can have a class, the wrapper class, an object from it, and then you serialize it. And you can have a just plain hard-coded JSON as I'm having here. It's up to you how to do it, but you have to set the response. Like if I had here the country wrapper and I create an object from it and I set the properties using the dot notation, I could use the serialize method that we saw together in the beginning of the session. But for the simplicity and just for the sake of the demo, I hard-coded the string here, the JSON that we return. And I'm returning that. So my mockup class is nothing more than hard-coding the response that we'll get. So I do an instance from the response, set the header to tell that I'm returning a JSON, setting the code that it's 200, and what's the body that we are getting back to call. And it doesn't matter, like if I was sending like Egypt, it will still return for me that. Like I'm hard coding that this is the response that is coming back. So you have to be mindful when you set this up. And that's the extra step that we have here. That because the test method cannot do a real API callout, so we are faking the response. So this step will tell Salesforce, when you have an API call, use this response. And here, because I have only one API call and I expect only one API, one response, that's the way to do it. Sometimes it gets more complicated that you can do multiple APIs and you will expect multiple responses. And in the mockup, we'll have to specify which request will send which response, but this is for another session. For this session, knows that only the two new things that you need to know for testing the callout for the trigger was because it's asynchronous, it's very important to use the start and stop. And because it's HTTP callout, we have to do the mock, and all of this is fixed except the class that you will call, like the instance you are creating an object from. And this class, this is fixed. You have to implement the HTTP callout mock. You have to have this method with the same name, same parameters, same return type. And here you are having the status code 200, and you have this body to return. Let's say you wanted to have a failure test, you would have a different code, and you have the error message that would return back. So you can test multiple scenarios by having different mockups. But that's what we wanted to show here. We saw the error, like here, this failed without the mock. Let's try it again. New run. I will run the same test method, test class, sorry. And now it succeeded. It was able to do the callout, the fake callout. It used the mockup that was returned, the response, and it was for Canada. So it inserted the countries. So I know it will insert Ottawa and Americas for the region because that's what I have here. So for example, if someone says like, oh, okay, no, I want this to be Ottawa too, now my test class will fail because I've changed the response that will be mocked or like hard-coded. So you have to be mindful. Whatever you hard-code here, you use it in your asserts as well. So in order for it to succeed. Some future limitations that I want to highlight is like one of them is the order. So I have for you here, what's the method name? Sorry again. Future order demo. So let me do future order demo with you quickly. I will open the resource, future order demo, and I will open it. And this method, I'm not doing anything except that I have 3 future methods. Each of them has like a different debug statement, and I'm calling them in order 1, 2, 3. So let's call this in my developer console. I will run all futures, and let's go to the logs. I will clear it. Someone may expect, like, if I ask, like, which one do you think, like, in the debug statements will be executed first? Will we see future 1 or future 2 or future 3? Some people may say, okay, you are calling it with the order, so it will be future 1, then 2, and 3. Let's see if that's what will happen. If I run, the first one in that case is future 2. Then I have the second one was future 1. Then the third is 3. When I tested this, I had 2, 1, and 3, same. And before the session, I tried, it was 3, 2, 1. So that's something just for you to know. If you have multiple future methods and you have in your class calling them one after the other, that doesn't guarantee that they will be executed in the order you are calling the future method in. Here it got 2, 1, 3 before the session. I tried it myself. It was 3, 2, 1. So the order, you cannot guarantee what's the order. And that's something important. If you have a series of future methods that you want to make sure that they run in order, you cannot be using future methods, because future methods, you cannot choose the order in which they will be executed. And other stuff is the limited to primitive data types, and you cannot call a future method from another future method. Like I cannot from future 1 call future 2, and from future 2 call 3. Like I cannot chain it to be called in a chain, like 1, then call 2, then call 3. I cannot do that. So those are limitations you have to keep in mind when working with future methods. So when to use a future method, like sometimes you want, when a case is closed, you want to trigger an email confirmation that you don't want it to slow the user if you are collecting a lot of information. You don't want to slow the user on the screen, so maybe you'll use a future method. So you want to make a call out from a trigger, like what we saw together today, and you don't care about having this, like you're not having a custom UI and you're not waiting for the response. You want to run in the background whenever the resources are available, update the records. So that's something you can use it. If you hit mixed DML errors at some point, mixed DML errors can be fixed easily with future method that we saw. Sometimes log information or sync with external system, like for example, if you want to send data to another system in the background. So you have, like, for example, you update a contact record and you want to update a marketing system or another external system in the background, and you are not waiting and you don't want to stop the user or like stop the transaction, stop the UI, keep spinning until you do that, you can do that. Sometimes you have a time-consuming operation, like when we said like loyalty score, you don't want the user to wait until you are accessing different records, different operation and transactions to figure out the loyalty score for the user. That something can be done in the background. Very important to know, like you cannot chain tasks, so you cannot chain one after the other, and you cannot like control the order. So those are like when and how to think about like using future, and the limitations that come with it as well. Next time we'll start exploring together the Cubo Apex and why we can use it or how it it's different than future. It's more complex to be implemented than the future, but it has its own benefit and why some people like to go and use it instead of future methods as well. I hope the session was useful and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions before the next session, you can reach out on Slack, LinkedIn. I would do my best to whether answer you during the week or create a video for you with the answer or to answer it next session.